this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda today?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. Before moving to the agenda, I would like to conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner James Alisi.
Here.
Commissioner David Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Commissioner Chenna Bright.
Here.
Commissioner Denise Sheehan.
Here.
Thank you. Now, before we turn to the regular agenda, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on items 201 or 401? Commissioner Alisi?
No.
Commissioner Valesky?
No recusals.
Commissioner Majori?
No recusals.
Commissioner Bright?
No.
Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes, I am recused from 201.
Thank you. That is noted. We'll now move to the regular agenda, and our first item for discussion, item 201 in case 21-E-0629, case 19-E-0735, and case 14-M-0224, as they relate to a statewide Solar for All program. It'll be presented today by Kelly Strait. Marco Padula and Tom Dwyer are also available for questions. Kelly,
Good
please
morning,
begin.
Chair Christian and Commissioners. Item 201 addresses staff's proposal for a statewide Solar for All program. This item, if adopted, is basically a statewide rollout of National Grid's expanded Solar for All program, which was approved by the Commission in January of 2022. Each utility serving electric customers would administer its own program like National Grid is currently doing. The statewide program discussed in the draft order considers the lessons learned from National Grid's program and makes changes accordingly for the statewide rollout. The Solar for All program is designed to deliver the benefits of community solar, referred to as Community Distributed Generation, or CDG, to low-income customers through a monthly bill credit. Each utility Solar for All program will enroll projects through a standard compensation level. That compensation level will be identified within each utility's Solar for All tariffs. CDG projects that are in development but not yet operational will be eligible to participate. Once those projects begin operation, they will inject their generation into whichever utility service territory the project is sited in and be compensated by that utility through the value stack. The value stack credits for a Solar for All project are split into three portions. The first portion is the developer share, which is the standard offer percentage of the project's value stack that project is paid. The second portion is the utility's administrative fee, which is capped at 1% and covers the utility's cost to implement the program. The third portion, or the remainder, is the customer share that is added to the credit pool or credit bank. Under the program, utilities aggregate bill credits generated by all participating projects and then distribute those credits to customers automatically enrolled in each utility's low-income energy affordability program, or EAP. Customers will have the option of opting out of the program. Unlike National Grid's program, which enrolls all their EAP customers, the draft order recommends starting with a subset of EAP customers, which are EAP customers in a disadvantaged community. This recommendation is made to align with the Renewable Energy Access and Community Help Program. The REACH program mandates that REACH participants are low to moderate income customers living in a disadvantaged community, and that low-income customers are the first to receive the benefits. For your awareness, comments recently came on the New York Power Authority's REACH petition, and staff is expected to bring that item to the Commission for consideration at a future session. The draft order recognizes the significant opportunity a balanced community solar market will offer low-income customers, allowing for additional community solar savings on top of the Solar for All bill credits. This scenario, known as dual participation, is when EAP customers participate in both Solar for All and opt-in CDG. Each utility will be responsible for conducting customer awareness, utility training on the program, and to jointly develop a dual participation plan. This plan will be used by the utilities to encourage dual participation by helping low-income customers sign up for opt-in CDG. The draft order discusses program controls to promote a balanced community solar market. The Solar for All program is designed to be an additive to the opt-in CDG market, not replace it. Statewide Solar for All will prohibit projects from retaining the New York Sun Community Adder or the Inclusive Community Solar Adder, or ICSA, as both incentives were authorized for the purposes of getting customers to participate in opt-in CDG. Over 95% of the Round 2 ICSA approved funding or available capacity remains uncommitted and will continue to be available for CDG projects to pursue opt-in CDG in disadvantaged communities. For the Solar for All program, NYSERDA will set the standard offer compensation levels by analyzing the level of value stack compensation needed for projects to advance to operation. The appropriate program compensation levels will be set and adjusted when necessary to safeguard a balanced community solar market. Together with ICSA opt-in projects, Solar for All will drive savings to low-income customers. Lastly, as tremendous efforts and investments continue to be made in the state to ensure the success of opt-in CDG, it is vital that the Solar for All model operates collectively with the opt-in CDG market. Some of these efforts include the Round 2 ICSA funding I just mentioned, the multi-rate discount for opt-in CDG projects, as well as advancements to opt-in CDG net crediting and billing. Moving on to the inclusion of storage. National Grid's expanded Solar for All program allowed community solar projects to participate. The statewide program will expand upon this and allow storage projects to participate within each of the utility Solar for All program. This recommendation is made to address limitations in the Con Edison territory. Con Edison has the largest number of EAP customers, but also has the greatest community solar siting constraints. Because the Con Edison territory is expected to represent the largest share of storage, it is logical to include storage in the statewide Solar for All program. This item aligns the statewide program year with the expanded Solar for All program year, which runs from December to November. In December of this year, the statewide program will begin. The first program year will be a year of procuring projects. Monthly bill credits will begin during the second program year, which starts December 2025. It will take time for projects to be developed under statewide Solar for All and for the customer share credit pools to be built up. As these credit banks increase, monthly bill credits will also go up, and consideration should be given to expand the initial participant base. All in all, the statewide Solar for All program is a long-term program designed aimed at driving the growth of CDG by directing the benefits of that growth to low-income households in the most effective and cost-efficient manner. That concludes my presentation. We are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I really appreciate the work staff put into this. And in looking back on my notes in this and other CDG items, it became clear to me, and this is something I want to make it clear to everyone, this was not something that just happened overnight. You mentioned the National Grid efforts from 2022, but we've been working on CDG in one way or shape or form for almost a decade. We've done at least a dozen orders in one way or another, refining and advancing our efforts related to CDG. And I see this as another step, refining the process and expanding access to it. And I think that's going to be critically important as we go forward, giving everyone an opportunity to engage and more importantly, giving everyone an opportunity to achieve savings. So I see this as a very important next step, and I really appreciate the work and thoughtfulness of staff in developing this order. I see this as in the public interest, and thank you for all your hard work. All right. Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, I'll be supporting this issue. It's directing its benefits to where it will be most needed as we expand our efforts, and that is low-income, disadvantaged areas in the state, so it shouldn't be too difficult to support not only this initiative, but everything that goes along as we expand it, and I appreciate your reports. Very well done.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Chair Christian. I don't have any questions, just a few really brief comments. I also want to congratulate all of you. You know, much of what we do is to respond and react to petitions that are filed by others. This has been your proposal, you meaning staff. You've refined it over time, and I think you've done an outstanding job in bringing this forward to us. So congratulations on all your hard work and time that you've put into this, and certainly the history, as Chair Christian briefly described earlier. I also do want to acknowledge National Grid's program. Somebody always has to go first, right? And they have, and have done a nice job with their program that we authorized, as you said, Kelly, back in January of 2022. A couple of highlights just to reiterate that I think are important in this order. That this program is additive to the opt-in community solar market, not replacing opt-in. And I know we've heard there are comments in the record about why that is important, and I appreciate the fact that you're acknowledging that both can coexist and will be helpful across the state. So that's important. Also, Kelly, as you indicated, the not only the inclusion of storage, but what you've done as it relates particularly to the Con Ed service territory. I think that's very important as well to greater the chances of success of the program. And then finally, as we look out to 2030, I mean, it seems like it's a long time away, but you referenced the New York Sun program and the expiration date that has. And I think that by bringing this forward to us now, there will be plenty of time to get the statewide Solar for All program up and running and be fully effective long before that 2030 date is before us. So again, thank you very much, and I look forward to supporting the item.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. I'd like to join my colleagues in congratulating you on good work and thanking you for doing it. I do have a couple quick questions. The first is, am I accurate to say that this order is in direct response to the January 2023 order that this commission passed or approved, directing staff to file the SFA proposal? In other words, is that the impetus of the work that went into the proposal that we're considering today?
I think that is accurate to say, Commissioner.
Okay.
As you mentioned, the CCA modification order, as we call it, directed staff to file the Solar for All proposal, which is the action that the Commission is considering here today.
Okay, thank you. Two other questions have to do with some of the concerns that are raised by members of the public who commented. And I think, you in the part of the presentation and also in Commissioner Valesky's remarks, you underscored how this program is additive and not replacing opt-in programs. Is that the answer to concerns that were expressed about this program potentially decreasing CDG competition, removing the role of customer acquisition companies, and hindering innovation?
Yes, I think it is. The order sets up a policy, as you mentioned, that is intended to be additive. We seriously considered the comments from a lot of the industry stakeholders with concerns that this might replace the existing CDG market. And there are a number of actions taken in the draft order that that are intended to prevent that from happening. One of the most significant comments we heard and significant actions we took in that respect is limiting the incentives, the ICSA and the community adder, to those opt-in projects and not allowing the Solar for All projects to receive those incentives, which staff believes will still continue to drive opt-in development in the state.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to underscore, those are not my concerns. I'm just characterizing concerns that were submitted
Yes.
through the process. Yeah. And along those lines, there were concerns expressed about this program being run by utilities, expressed in different ways. What's your assessment of that type of concern?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say the program is run by utilities, and CDG in any form is going to have some utility involvement, as they're, in almost every case, the entity doing the billing here. And it's a similar construct under the Solar for All program as you would have in an opt-in CDG program, where ultimately it's the utility who's going to be billing or putting these credits on customer bills. I think to the extent the Solar for All program has increased utility involvement, that comes on the side of the utilities procuring actual projects to contribute to the credit pool. But even under that circumstance, the projects and everyone are compensated the same way they would be under an opt-in project through the Veeder value stack.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions. And once again, thank you for the good work. I do plan on voting in favor of this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple comments, no questions. So I enthusiastically support this recommendation, the recommendation on item 201. I want to note that this order begins with energy affordability. Moving to cheaper, homegrown, clean energy is about taking control of our future and our destiny. And in this effort, we cannot leave anybody behind. We must move as one. The statewide Solar for All program gives people access to homegrown, pollution-free energy, energy that is produced in New York by New Yorkers. Not everything that gets added to our sustainable energy mix will be utility scale renewable generation projects. And we need and will be using a variety of resources that will keep us flexible, nimble, and able to respond to New Yorkers' energy needs in the most cost-effective and reliable way. As I understand it, New York has the largest and most successful community solar market in the country. We are a model for other states. And our successful growth in this market has been enabled by smart state policy and the hard work of many. And today we are taking some next steps that not only making the option to participate in community distributed generation more widely available, but this order has a focus on marginalized and disadvantaged New York communities to transition our energy system in the way that we envision, without recognizing the gross inequities that result not only from not intentionally centering historically marginalized populations, that would be a miscarriage of our duty to the people and, of course, counter to the CLCPA. So I am impressed with staff's recommendations here, the thoughtful incorporation of stakeholder input, so that this program complements our already successful opt-in efforts, the intentional focus on relief to disadvantaged communities, the way staff has taken a balanced approach to incorporate the need for battery storage infrastructure to see the state's vision through, learning lessons from our experiences and incorporating those lessons into our actions. These are all keys to designing the innovative clean energy future that New York and New Yorkers want to see. So I want to thank staff for those efforts. I would only add that this is not just New York who wants to see a clean energy future. The world is looking for these solutions. Wind, sun, they can be harnessed by anyone, anywhere, if they have the know-how. New York is making the roadmap for others to follow. What we do here matters. It means something to the world, and it means something in the world. Innovative solutions that are made in America, starting in New York. So community solar, community distributed generation is a powerful way to support clean energy development, and I will be supporting staff's proposal as outlined here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sheehan, I believe you are recusing from this item. So thank you. All right. That said, we'll now do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to adopt the statewide Solar for All proposal with modifications as discussed. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Commissioner Bright?
Yes.
All right. And Commissioner Sheehan, you?
I am recused,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
All right. That said, this item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you all very much. All right. We're now going to move to our second item for discussion today. Item 301 in case 24-E-0240 as it relates to the 2024 Summer Preparedness Report. It'll be presented today by Sharir Chowdhury, Andrew Timbrook, and Kayla Whitaker. Tammy Mitchell, Leica Jonal, Robert Cully, Kate Overacker, Paul Dartmetko, Richard Berkeley, and Chelsea Lequiter are available for questions. Sharir, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. My name is Sharir Chowdhury, and I am an Utility Engineering Specialist 2 in the Electric Safety and Reliability section of the Office of Energy System Planning and Performance. Today, we will be briefing you on the state's electric transmission and distribution system summer preparedness for 2024. If we can please turn to slide 3. Each spring, staff conducts its annual review of the electric system and the utility preparedness to meet the summer operating conditions for New York. This review focuses on electric system reliability and is part of our normal course of business at the department and is of high priority review. Summer peak operating conditions are often when the electric system can be the most stressed, and we look to each of the utilities and to the New York Independent System Operator, referred to as ISO hereafter, for assurances that we are well prepared to meet New York customers' needs for upcoming season. The review consists of an assessment of New York ISO projected demand forecast and supply resource availability. Additionally, staff in its annual issues its annual summer preparedness survey to each of the utilities and reviews all responses, as well as conducts interviews with each utility to discuss planned and completed system reinforcements, spare equipment inventories, and confirm that they will reliably meet customer demands for a summer operating period. Through these surveys and interviews, we find that each of the utilities have completed or will complete all major planned and will have adequate spare equipment on hand to meet unforeseen circumstances or system events. Based on staff's review and assessment of the utility data and meeting with each of the individual utilities and the NISO, we find that the state's electric transmission and distribution system are prepared to reliably meet forecast 2024 summer electric demands. Next slide, please. Now we'll take a look at forecasted load compared to available supply resources for the upcoming summer. The chart shows historical actuals and forecasted state peak demand as projected by New York ISO. The blue colored line shows the 2024 peak forecast over the next 10 years. This summer's peak forecast is consistent with what we have seen over the past several years, and New York's baseline forecast projects a statewide peak demand for 2024 of 31,541 megawatts. Looking out over the next 10 years, the peak forecast remains relatively flat and begins to rise in the later years as increases in electrification and projected load from existing and future large load projects interconnecting to the transmission systems are realized. This is offset in part by positive effects of the state's energy efficiency program and to underlying forecast econometric growth rates. Next slide, please. Corresponding to the previous graph, this chart shows the cumulative forecast impacts of contributions of energy efficiency and distributed generations towards reducing peak demands. The blue bar represents the forecasted energy efficiency impacts, and the red bars represents the impacts of distributed generation. I would just like to make a note of the slight decline in distributed generation impact on the system summer peak loads in the later years, as you can see in the graph. While the current New York control area summer peak typically occurs in the late afternoon, typically 4 to 5 p.m. range, it is expected that the summer peak will shift into the evening hours in the later forecast. This results as additional behind-the-meter solar generation is added to the system and expected EV charging increases in the evening hours. This shift in peak hour timing will result in behind-the-meter solar generation becoming less coincident with the peak, which is reflected in the reduction seen in the graph for the later years. By the year 2034, the combined effects of these programs is projected to help lower peak demand by approximately 6,300 megawatts. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the expected available resource capability for 2024. The installed generating capacity for 2024 totals 37,867 megawatts, an increase of 877 megawatts compared to 2023. The increase in generating capacity can be primarily attributed to renewables coming online. Combining the installed generation capacity with projected demand response and special case resources, as well as net firm purchase imports, provides New York with a total of 40,733 megawatt worth of capacity resource for 2024. Next slide, please. The New York State Reliability Council has set the 2024-2025 installed reserve margin at 22% above forecast peak demand. This 22% installed reserve requirement results in a 6,939 megawatt minimum requirement above the forecast peak demand, for a total installed capacity requirement of 38,480 megawatts. As mentioned previously, the total available capacity for 2024 is 40,733 megawatts, which is 2,253 megawatts above the minimum required. This equates to an actual installed reserve of 29.1%, which above the forecast peak for 2024, providing a further cushion to serve the peak load beyond the 22% reserve margin required by the New York State Reliability Council. To further curb peak energy demands, each of the utilities Also have load relief programs in which customers are compensated for providing load reductions when called upon. Additionally, the NISO and each utility have operating procedures in place to further mitigate any unforeseen reliability issues. These emergency operating procedures include emergency demand response programs, voltage reductions, voluntary industrial curtailments, emergency purchases, among others. The NISO projects that about 3,275 megawatts will be available under emergency operating procedures if needed this summer. This now concludes my portion of the presentation. Given all the information we have presented here, staff believes that the electric system is adequately prepared to reliably meet New York's customers' needs for the summer of 2024. I will now turn it over to Andy Timbrook to discuss the projected summer volatility and summer price outlook. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreer. Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. My name is Andy Timbrook, and I'm a Utility Engineering Specialist in the Office of Rates and Tariffs. In this portion of the presentation, I'll be providing a summary of how the utilities have performed at reducing electric supply price volatility for their full-service residential customers. This will include an overview of the utilities' residential electric supply portfolio composition for this coming summer, a comparison of this summer's energy futures to last summer's futures and actual prices, the capacity price changes as compared to summer 2023, and finally I will present the statewide estimated supply bill for this upcoming summer as compared to the last several years for full-service residential electric customers using projected utilities supply bill estimates that are inclusive of the utilities hedging plans. Next slide, please. So before I begin, I will reiterate that electric market prices are dependent on present market conditions, and the utilities under commission jurisdiction have no control over the market price. The cost of electricity is determined largely by the energy and capacity markets administered by the New York ISO. However, utilities do have the ability to mitigate the month-to-month volatility of end-use supply prices for their mass market customers through hedging and their supply rate mechanisms. The end-use, full-service mass market residential supply rate mechanisms have flexibility to spread large reconciliations over more than a single month to mitigate this volatility, a practice that utilities have utilized more frequently in the last several years. My presentation will focus on measuring how the utilities have performed at that task historically and what steps the utilities have taken to manage any market price volatility that may occur this summer. Next slide, please. This graph shows the result of the utilities' electric supply price volatility mitigation efforts dating all the way back to December of 2008. The red line is the average New York ISO market price volatility, and the blue line is the volatility of the utilities' residential electric supply portfolios. Each point on the line represents the volatility over a 12-month period as measured by the coefficient of variation. As you can see from the graph, the utilities' electric supply portfolio has consistently experienced less volatility as compared to the market. The high points on the graph show various points over the past several years where market price volatility spiked. During those times, the utilities' portfolios generally experienced significantly less volatility. This performance is attributable to the hedging practices that the utilities employ to smooth the unpredictability of market prices. As previously mentioned, the utilities, through their supply rate mechanisms, each have the ability to and have at various points flexed large reconciliations from prior period under or over recoveries of supply costs over multiple months to mitigate the impact of unpredictable market price swings. Overall, as compared to the market price volatility, the statewide portfolio should be expected to continue to experience less volatility in the future. Next slide, please. This chart shows the elements of the composite residential electric supply portfolio for this summer across all investor-owned utilities. As shown, about 63% of the portfolio consists of fixed-price contracts, and of those, the majority are financial in nature. The fixed portion of the portfolio also includes newer physical contracts, older legacy contracts, and a small amount of the utility's own generation with fixed fuel costs as well as NYPA contracts. The balance of the portfolio is predominantly made up of market purchases, followed by relatively small amounts of utilities' own generation with variable fuel costs, and index contracts that are primarily indexed to natural gas. Next slide, please. This chart shows this upcoming summer's expected average energy market prices based on ICE futures, last summer's futures, and last summer's actual prices for New York City, the Hudson Valley, and Western New York, or New York ISO zones J, G, and A respectively. Last summer's expected energy market prices that we reported to you in May are shown in green. Last summer's actual market prices are in blue, and this summer's expected market prices are shown in red. As you can see, this summer's expected prices are lower than the futures prices from this time last year by up to 15%, and higher than the actual prices by between 8 and 16%. Last summer, the actual prices ended up between 9 and 26% lower than what was expected going into the summer period, which is mainly due to lower gas prices. I would like to note, however, that actual prices will likely vary from these futures due to a variety of factors, including weather, economic conditions, and demand on the system. Next slide, please. This slide shows what last year's summer strip auction capacity prices were and what this upcoming summer's prices are. As you can see, there's very little change in prices from last summer. Next slide, please. So this last slide in my portion of the presentation provides a bit of context for how the expected change in market prices could impact the electric supply portion of customers' bills. This chart shows an estimate of the supply portion of a typical residential monthly bill as a result of the year-to-year changes in the load-weighted full-service mass market residential commodity prices. So for the chart, we consider a typical residential customer to use 600 kilowatt hours per month, which is close to the statewide average but can vary by utility. The summer monthly bill estimate for this upcoming summer, cumulative for June through September, is expected to be about 3% lower than last summer on a statewide average basis. The slight decrease in the 2024 bill estimate as compared to 2023 reflects the expected changes in market prices as well as the impact from the utilities' hedging programs. I should note that depending on where a customer is located in the state, what utility they're served by, their actual use, and actual market prices, their summer commodity bill will vary from what is shown here and could be either higher or lower than last summer. To conclude, the utilities have continued to perform well at reducing the month-to-month price volatility as compared to the market volatility, and have maintained approximately a 63% fixed price hedge level for this summer on a statewide average basis, which should mitigate any significant unexpected price spikes should they occur. Further, we continue to communicate with utilities and monitor their full-service mass market customer supply price mechanisms and consider any adjustments as needed to improve volatility mitigation efforts. Now I will turn it over to Kayla for the final portion of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Kayla Whitaker. I'm a Utility Analyst 1 with the Office of Consumer Services. Next slide, please. Over the past 5 years, the Department's Office of Consumer Services staff, in conjunction with intervening parties and the major New York electric utilities, have worked within rate case proceedings to enhance customer protections during extreme heat events. The Federal Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, provides the following definition for extreme heat events: the summertime temperatures that are much hotter and or humid than average. Because some places are hotter than others, this depends on what's considered average for a particular location at that time of year. Humid and muggy conditions can make it seem hotter than it really is. The CDC also describes some of the dangers arising among vulnerable populations, which includes but is not limited to low-income households, seniors, the medically vulnerable, such as those with medical conditions, and infants or children. The specific protections, which I will summarize later in this presentation, are included in joint proposals that were approved by the Commission in the respective rate proceedings for the following utilities: Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation, or Central Hudson, Consolidated Edison Company of New York Incorporated, or Con Edison, Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation, doing business as National Grid, New York State Electric and Gas Corporation, or NYSEG, Orange and Rockland Utilities Incorporated, or O&R, and Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation, or RG&E. At a high level, the major electric utilities are prohibited from terminating a residential customer's electric service for the incomplete or non-payment of bills during extreme heat events. It is important to note that the Public Service Electric and Gas Company and Long Island Power Authority, or PSEG and LIPA, is not a jurisdictional electric utility and is not included in these protections at this time. However, LIPA typically adopts major consumer protections similar to those required by the Commission, so staff anticipates LIPA will echo these protections. Negotiating new consumer protections in rate proceedings often results in non-uniform but detailed consumer protections and utility procedures. However, the Commission could, in the future, establish a generic proceeding to make these protections uniform across the state's major electric utilities, as was done with the utility low-income programs in the Commission's Low-Income Energy Affordability Policy proceeding. The extreme heat event protections currently in place include, but are not limited to, prohibiting service terminations for the non-payment or incomplete payment of bills. Terminations will not occur on days where the temperature is in excess of 85 degrees for NYSEG and RG&E, 90 degrees for Con Edison, 93 degrees for Central Hudson, and 95 degrees for 2 or more consecutive days, or 100 degrees on 1 or more consecutive days for National Grid and O&R. Halting residential customer terminations for non-payment in specific regions within National Grid's or O&R's specific service territories when the National Weather Service declares a heat advisory. Staff notes that a company's service territory can be separated into 5 or more service territories. Halting terminations for the entire service territory for Central Hudson and Con Edison, or in specific higher temperature regions for National Grid, NYSEG, O&R, and RG&E. Utilizing the National Weather Service to determine heat index temperatures, which are a trigger for Central Hudson, Con Edison, National Grid, NYSEG, and RG&E, or the Weather Channel, which is used to determine a heat index for O&R. Halting terminations on the day prior to and or following forecasted days with temperatures that exceed the heat index threshold indicated within the joint proposals for Central Hudson and Con Edison. This was implemented as an added layer of protection since heat islands, which are defined by the Environmental Protection Agency as urbanized areas that experience higher temperatures than outlying areas, retain heat longer than rural areas. New York City, within Con Edison service territory, is a prime example of a heat island. Additionally, Con Edison has added language to its disconnection notices that informs customers of the company's weather protections. Furthermore, the utilities have established dedicated web pages for extreme weather on their respective websites to inform customers of their protections against service termination during extreme cold or extreme heat events. The Department's Summer Preparedness webpage, which includes summer safety tips, bill payment programs, and energy-saving tips, will also house the links to the utilities' web pages. The establishment of extreme heat protections is an additional layer of protection for New York consumers who may be facing terminations due to non-payment. And in future utility rate proceedings, the Office of Consumer Services staff will continue to strive for uniformity among utility extreme heat practices and provide greater transparency toward consumers. This concludes our presentation, and staff is now available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the presentation, and it's encouraging to see that we are prepared for the summer. I was very encouraged and surprised to see the impact of our solar on our overall peak over time. I think that's new information for me, so thank you for that. But the one key takeaway I feel compelled to point out is the conservatism that we take in preparing for the grid, and I think it's helpful to walk step by step. Looking at one of the earlier slides where you highlighted the forecast over time, what's clear to me is when we forecast, we are conservative in our forecasts, and typically our load falls below that. Definitely made that clear. But I think what goes even further is in our preparations, we're equally conservative. We're not preparing based on the forecast. There's a cushion built into that above and beyond. And then there's an even further cushion through the demand response capabilities you mentioned. So I'm very encouraged by the information you provided today. I know this is hopefully very reassuring to everyone listening that we are taking the need for reliability seriously, because I see these two as a very conservative step-by-step approach to making sure we have not just the right forecast to predict our needs, but the right assets to meet those needs as the situation evolves. So thank you for putting this together. Appreciate it. And Kayla, I think this is your first time as lead, so congratulations and great job. All right. Thank you, everyone. Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank the entire staff, everybody involved in putting this together. Very useful information. I'll be supportive. Well, we're not voting on it, but I do want to. I want to remark on one thing, and it's just a personal reaction that there's still circumstances under which somebody's power could be shut off, and it just, to me, it's very unsettling. Not that we're going to do anything about that here. It's probably something for the legislature to handle, which is also something I'm always reluctant to offer. But in any event, there are circumstances where someone's power can be shut off, correct? Yes, that's very unsettling to me, and that's just a statement for the record. So, in any event, good job. A great report on everybody's part, and thank you for the information.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Chair Christian. I don't have any questions or really any comments other than to say that even though this is not a voting item, it doesn't make it any less important than anything else we do here in session. So really, really good job and good information for all of us to have, most particularly for the public to be aware of. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. I have two hypothetical questions. This is a reassuring presentation because the conclusion is that the state's electric transmission and distribution system is prepared to reliably meet the forecast. But what if that wasn't the case? What if the forecast projected demand exceeding supply? What kind of measures might we be considering at this point?
Commissioner, I believe the New York State Reliability Council sets the reserve margin at 22%, and presently this year it's above and beyond that at 29%.
Yeah.
So that provides a very large cushion for us.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have demand response programs in place that can further shed load or reduce load. And on top of that, the NISO and the utilities have emergency operating procedures in place where some of these are impacts load reductions and some are additional net import purchases. So that further provides a cushion. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, in part, but I'm going to ask it another hypothetical question. which is imagine that the reality was different than the projection. Say the entire months of July and August, every day was over 100 degrees. People are running air conditioning, very, very high. And the reality was that the supply didn't meet the demand. I'm not asking about shutoffs, but what would actually happen? Would there be blackouts? Would air conditioning not work? What would be the lived experience under that type of very, very extreme hypothetical situation?
Commissioner, this is Lecca Jonah. I can chime in if I could here.
Yeah.
The scenario you posit there, we just say there's not enough supply to meet the demand. That's a very serious situation. And assuming that in that scenario that we can't access supply from our neighbors, public appeals aren't working, everything we have is not working, I guess the bottom line is the utilities would have to definitely strategically shed some load, because you always have to maintain that balance between supply and demand and maintain some reserve, because you never know what's going to happen after that event. But that's a pretty dire scenario you just predicted there.
Yeah. Well, I'm not predicting it. I'm asking
Or
that
a
in the
positive,
hypothetical.
rather.
Yeah. I'm asking this in part out of curiosity, but also just to sort of highlight the importance of this presentation being correct, being right. And so it has been, and I'm encouraged by it, and I appreciate the presentation. But that's why I ask. I'm not trying to make a point. Other than that, this information is important, and it's important that the system work. Otherwise, the consequences could in fact be dire. So that, a lot of other decisions that we make help establish this condition that you're reporting on today, and that's why I asked. But thank you very much for the presentation, and again, I find it encouraging going into this year.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Yes, thank you, staff, for this presentation. I did have one quick question. I thought I had seen that we had lowered peak demand from last year. Is that right or no?
The forecast is lower slightly, yes.
Okay, so the forecast, but peak demand actuals.
Yes, so I believe last year's peak demand was lower than the forecasted peak demand. I'm not sure if that's where your question is.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, that was my question, but thank you so much for this presentation, and it's essential that we ensure we're prepared for the summer, so very glad that to see this presentation and the forecasts, and that we are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, staff. Sharir, Andrew, Kayla, I appreciate you guys, your presentation and the work that you put into this. I join my fellow commissioners in being happy to hear that we can make it through the summer. Obviously ensuring that we have a reliable grid is one of our primary responsibilities. I did spend some time with the slides, so the one that I've really kind of focused on is slide 6, which is the 2024 summer capability. And just in the year over year, obviously very happy to see that our installed generation capacity within the state has increased, not hugely, but still going in the right direction as we're deploying more renewables. Demand response also increased slightly. And then we get to net firm purchase imports, which is a significant reduction. And, so I had to really think about that and what does that mean? So on the one hand, to Commissioner Bright's point earlier about homegrown clean energy, that's what we want, right? But at the same time, for reliability, we still do need to know that we can count on our neighbors and capacity from our neighbors. So trying to get under what is behind that reduction in, available imports, I was just trying to understand the dynamic there. So I did thank you, Leka, for sharing. I went to the Gold Book. I did some homework, but fortunately, they don't really get into it as much as I thought. So I'm just hoping. I don't know, Leka or Sharir, if you want to just talk a little bit about what's happening with respect to the availability of imported, capacity from imports. What's the dynamic that's happening in our neighboring states that we should be aware of? And then the other thing is, is this a trend? I mean, if we see another, 1,000+ megawatt reduction in available capacity from our neighboring states next year, we're going to have to really look closely at that, and we're going to have to make up for that in installed generation in state and demand response or other measures. So just if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Sure, I can talk about that a bit. Over time, our neighbors, PJM, New England, Ontario, primarily, they're undergoing a transition as well. So the generation fleet mix is changing, and some of that mix, coal, natural gas, is actually retiring in some of these areas. So there's just less available. And I think that's in part driving it. Of course, market prices and that whole complexity is also driving it as well. And but I'd say that just less available, even from our neighbors, because they're in a transition as well. Maybe not to the extent that New York is, striving to be, but they're moving along as well. And as far as the trend, your second part of your question, it's hard to say at the trend. We don't know what these generation asset owners will be doing in the future. So it is a bit of a drop this year from the previous year. But if you go back several years, last year's was kind of actually a bit of a peak. So it's really not dire to use that term at this point.
Okay. It's important. And one thing I didn't see, which I think would be helpful, is some, to the extent that our neighbor, and it's not from you guys, it's a bigger picture, but, our neighboring RTOs typically know what's happening in terms of scheduling, who's going to terminate operations, who's going to retire, being able to know that dynamic, I think I'd love to see that in the Gold Book, not your problem. So to the extent that we can get there. So thank you. And then because, I'm these things jump out at me. So Andrew, I just had a couple of questions for you too, if you could expound on. We talk about the statewide weighted average monthly residential supply bill, and that we can expect that to be 3% lower this summer. So the lead up to that slide, included information on obviously market prices being potentially higher. So I just was hoping you could talk to that point a little bit, just to help me understand it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I understand what you're getting at with that we have futures prices that are going one way and estimated supply bill that's going the other way.
Yeah.
Essentially, the supply bill is a mix of not only energy futures, but also the utilities hedging portfolio. And so when you put that all together, you get a supply bill that's just going down slightly.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think that's all my questions. My PSA for the summer is to wear sunscreen. So, just a friendly reminder.
Thank you very much. And again, this item is for information purposes only, so we'll now move on to the next item for discussion. But before we do, Sharir, thank you. Great job, Andrew. Thank you. And Kayla, thank you very much. All right, we will now move to the third and last item for discussion today. Item 401, case 23-W-0111, which addresses Veolia water rates. It will be presented by Judge Michael Clark, Judge Ashley Moreno, and Judge Dakin Leakakes, as well as Mike Ryder, who will be available for questions. Judge Clark, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian, Commissioners. My name is Michael Clark. I was assigned to preside over this proceeding with Administrative Law Judge Ashley Moreno. Before you is a...
We're just going to switch the nameplates to
All right,
make sure
thank
we
you.
know who everybody is for the recording.
By the end,
Thank you.
it might be preferable if it was someone else. Before you is a draft order that would establish a 4-year rate plan for Veolia Water New York for the period between February 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2027. With the minor exception of a technical change necessary to ensure compliance with a law applicable to portions of Veolia's service territory, the rate plan is consistent with a joint proposal, or JP, filed by Veolia, Department of Public Service staff, the Rockland Business Association, and Laborers Local 754. Partial signatories to the JP include the City of Rye, the Village of Rybrook, and the Village of Portchester, together the Westchester municipalities, and the Public Utility Law Project of New York, or PULP, with the Westchester municipalities in favor of those provisions applicable to the Westchester Rate District, and PULP in favor of the Water Affordability Program. Veolia provides water service to more than 120,000 customers in parts of Rockland, Orange, Westchester, Putnam, and Tioga counties, which previously received service from several different water systems. Veolia commenced this proceeding in March 2023, seeking to consolidate the rates of its existing service territories by creating a New York rate district where it proposed to increase annual revenues by approximately $18.4 million, and a Westchester rate district where the company sought to increase annual revenues by approximately $14.1 million. Veolia requested an overall return on equity of 10.5% and a common equity ratio of 53%. In direct testimony, DPS staff agreed with Veolia's consolidation proposal, but recommended only an $8.5 million revenue increase in the New York rate district and a $3.6 million increase in Westchester. Staff proposed an 8.85% return on equity and a common equity ratio of 44%. Settlement negotiations began in July 2023, successfully culminating in the joint proposal filed in January. As I indicated earlier, the JP proposes a 4-year rate plan that would begin on February 1st, 2024 and continue until December 31st, 2027. When reviewing a settlement in a rate case, the Commission must ensure that its terms enable the utility to provide safe, adequate, and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. The Commission must also ensure that the settlement's terms, as a whole, produce a result that is in the public interest. Factors considered in this analysis include whether the terms appropriately balance the interests of a utility's ratepayers, its investors, and the company's long-term viability, produce outcomes that may have arisen had the case been fully litigated, are consistent with the social, economic, and environmental policies of the Commission and the state, and whether they are supported in the record. The joint proposal satisfies the foregoing criteria. It adopts the company's consolidation proposal, creating the New York Rate District and the Westchester Rate District. In the former, levelized revenue increases would range from $8.7 million to $9.9 million, equating to a 6.7% revenue increase in each rate year. In Westchester, increases would range from $4.9 million to $5.6 million, equating to a 5.9% increase in each rate year. The rate plan is based on a 9.1% return on equity and a 48% common equity ratio. It includes an earnings sharing mechanism that is triggered if the company's actual return exceeds 9.6% in any rate year. The joint proposal provides Veolia with funding necessary to facilitate its per- and polyfluoroalkyl, or PFAS, remediation efforts. PFAS are manufacturing chemicals in use since the 1940s that are an urgent threat to public health and the environment, which people may be exposed to through drinking water. According to the New York State Department of Health, New York's drinking water standards are among the most stringent in the country, and water systems will require significant upgrades to their water treatment processes to comply with maximum contaminant levels. While the joint proposal ensures that Veolia can do so, it also anticipates the company's pursuit of potentially available PFAS remediation funding from federal or other third-party sources. Veolia must provide an annual report to the Commission detailing its efforts in this regard. If the company is successful, any recovered funds would be deferred for the benefit of customers and have no impact on the company's return. Another serious health concern is lead, which may be introduced into drinking water through pipes that run from the main in the street to a customer's home or business. The joint proposal accordingly also requires that Veolia continue its customer-side lead service line replacement program. In particular, when the company replaces lead water service lines in public rights-of-way, it will offer property owners the option to replace the portion of the line on their property at no cost. This is a modification intended to enhance participation and reduce the public's potential exposure to lead, as the existing program previously required a customer contribution. Turning to climate change and the environment, the joint proposal requires Veolia to prepare a greenhouse gas study and decarbonization plan that will examine the impact of solar panels, vehicle electrification, water conservation, non-revenue water reduction, conduit hydropower, and any planned new supply sources on the company's greenhouse gas emissions. Relatedly, the JP's provisions require Veolia to file testimony in its next rate case regarding the potential effects of climate change on its water supply, water quality and infrastructure, as well as how the company intends to mitigate any identified vulnerabilities. The joint proposal establishes the Water Affordability Program, the first low-income discount program for water services in New York State. According to Pulp, the program balances ease of enrollment with administrative burden for the creation of a common-sense program that will help the company's low-income customers better afford their water bill. More specifically, program participants will receive a $17 monthly discount, equivalent to the monthly meter charge, and may be eligible for a one-time reconnection fee waiver. Through the Water Affordability Conservation Plan, participants will also be eligible to receive rebates that promote the reduction of indoor and outdoor water use at double the value offered to other Veolia customers. Due to a $1.5 million contribution from Veolia's shareholders directed by the Commission in a prior case, the Water Affordability Program will have no customer impacts in rate year 1 and reduced impacts in rate year 2. While there is limited opposition to the JP from certain parties, the arguments supporting their positions are not persuasive, and they do not warrant rejecting the joint proposal. Briefly, the developer of a potential project in the village of Portchester opposes a provision in the JP that apportions development costs to certain projects there, 80% to developers and 20% to existing customers. Contrary to the claims of the developer, this provision is consistent with action taken by the Commission in comparable situations, and it reflects an equitable sharing of costs to serve new large customers between the new large customer and all other existing customers. Next, several municipalities in Rockland are opposed to consolidation in the New York Rate District, arguing that it will result in Rockland customers subsidizing customers of the other territories. This is untrue, as costs will actually decrease over time by being spread across a broader customer base. Additionally, the joint proposal includes a 2% productivity adjustment intended to capture administrative efficiencies stemming from consolidation. Finally, the Rockland municipalities, as well as a group of interveners referred to in the order as Joint Rockland, Also maintain that the 9.1% return on equity is too high, particularly with respect to a 15-year regulatory asset called the Haverstraw Water Supply Project, which has been controversial in Rockland since it was first proposed by Veolia's predecessor in 2007. As relevant here, the Commission approved the company's recovery of underlying costs associated with the project in a rate order in 2017. While the Commission has also previously imposed a lower return for the project than it has for the remainder of the company's rate base, it did so because project costs in those proceedings were a major driver of the associated rate increases. That is not the case here, and imposing a lower return for the project would have no bearing on the 6.7% increases in the New York Rate District during the 4-year rate plan. In conclusion, the joint proposal is supported by the record and in the public interest. It offers multi-year rate certainty to the company and its customers. It includes customer service performance incentives and an earnings sharing mechanism, as well as several health and safety-related provisions. The joint proposal also enhances the company's existing conservation and efficiency program, directs the company to evaluate the potential impact of climate change on its operations, and it establishes the first low-income discount program for water service in New York State. The advancement of these important policy goals, balanced against the impact of the recommended rate increases on ratepayers, ensures the company's continued ability to provide safe and reliable service at just and reasonable rates. That concludes our presentation, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. I don't think I could have said it any better, and I thank you for presenting the case as done. I know this was a long and difficult process to get to where we are today, but I think the 100,000+ customers affected by this will benefit from improved water quality, better availability, and greater conservation. So I think I agree with you when I hear that this is a series of investments that are in the public interest, and thank you for working with the stakeholders to make this happen.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lisi.
I'll be supporting this. Good work all around. It serves the needs of the area, and so my vote will be yes. Good report.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Chair Christian, and thank you, Judge Clark and Judge Moreno, for presiding over this case. It's an important case. And we don't see that many water cases in New York. We see, we're usually talking about joint proposals having to do with electricity and gas. And that, of course, as we know, is a result of the fact that the vast majority of New Yorkers are actually served by public water systems. I do want to, first of all, acknowledge, and I do it in particular because I know here this morning we have a number of representatives from various organizations who are here and are concerned about many issues that may come before the Commission in the future. So I'll just use that as an opportunity to thank all of the stakeholders who did participate in this joint proposal, and I know both of you know how important hearing from stakeholders in these rate cases are. So thank you to all the stakeholders who did participate in this process. As we consider joint proposals as a commission, we obviously do so, and as you concluded, Judge Clark, through the lens of safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And when it comes to rate cases, there's always lots of talk about rates, obviously, and the affordability issue. There's always a lot of focus on reliability, as there should be. And safety is sometimes not as front and center as maybe it should. So I'll just take just a couple of moments because I think there are two really, really important safety issues that were included in this joint proposal that are worth mentioning. The first, and Chair Christian alluded to both of them, the funding for the PFAS remediation efforts by the company is really important. And I also think it's important, and I know this came later in the process, some potential federal opportunities that the company may in fact be able to avail themselves of. Appreciate that you not only mentioned it today, but included that in our joint proposal, so that we are encouraging the company to pursue those funding opportunities, and if they in fact are successful, that will have a positive impact on the ratepayers themselves. And the second, I think, really important item is the lead service line replacement program. We're not only continuing it, but I think it's a unique opportunity and would encourage those homeowners who may have the opportunity where the public water line is being replaced. Now they have the opportunity at no cost to replace their extension to their own home. So that's my understanding, a new development, and I would just encourage those homeowners who may in fact have that opportunity to take advantage of that. So thank you again. Really important joint proposal, and we'll be pleased to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majora?
Thank you. I just have a few questions. Let me ask the first one just so we could be very clear on this. There were some commenters who expressed concern about consolidated rates, believing that they will result in higher rates for some customers and lower rates for others than the alternative within the service territory. Could you just, clarify your assessment of those concerns?
Sure, Commissioner. I think that with respect to consolidation, the Commission's policy has been for water to consolidate where possible, and that provides certainly, I think, over the long term, a larger customer base for all of the, to spread all of the costs associated with the entirety of the system. In the short term, I think that there's been some criticism that perhaps some smaller systems might be more advantaged than others, but in the long term, I think all costs will be shared over the customer base, and that will ensure the long-term and safe functioning of the entirety of the system for customers.
Okay, thank you. Second question has to do with the concern that was expressed, including in an earlier part of the process by staff about a Port Chester Economic Development Project, which in the JP will be funded 80% by the developer, but 20% by ratepayers. And my understanding is that 20%, if this project didn't exist at all, it would not result in lower bills for ratepayers. Is that correct understanding? And if so, why is that the case?
I'll try to answer your question.
Forgive my mush-mouthed way of asking it.
I think that you're addressing two issues that are separate, but may appear to be connected. The joint proposal is going to fund capital improvement projects in the Westchester Rate District. Those $48 million will be funded regardless of whether or not the Port Chester development projects move forward. The Plan the Port provisions are essentially the cost sharing. What the Commission will be approving is the 80% and 20% split. If the development was not to undergo in Port Chester, improvements wouldn't be necessary. So without the development, the existing infrastructure will satisfy the needs of the community. That was staff's original position. So we don't want to fund those because we don't have to fund them. However, after the development takes place, the infrastructure upgrades will benefit existing customers because there will be new updated infrastructure, new pipes, new pressure systems. So the existing customers will derive a benefit, and that's where the 20% contribution comes in. But as a funding mechanism, there's no additional money in the joint proposal for Plan the Port.
Okay.
I hope that was clear. I know it was a little muddled.
It was, and my question was a little muddled, but so I'm going to just, it had mostly answered the question that I asked, but there was one other element of what I was trying to get at. The water company, I think, submitted a response that even if this project was not to come to pass, there would still be system upgrades needed that ratepayers would be charged for. So they didn't anticipate this project being a cost driver. and again, forgive me if I'm asking this in a somewhat muddled way, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
No, I think that that's the complicating factor for everyone. The capital plan provides $48 million for capital improvements in that rate district.
Yeah.
That $48 million will be used regardless of whether or not there are any developments moving forward in Plan
Yeah.
Report.
Right.
So-
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. All right. Shifting gears. The staff analysis of this JP concludes that approval of it is consistent with New York's climate goals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask a little bit of an unfair question, which I think you don't know the answer to, because it's not really a DPS concern. Do you happen to know if any other state entity or division that considered providing the Port Chester Economic Development Project with assistance, did their own CLCPA analysis on whatever type of assistance was under consideration?
I'm afraid that's outside of the scope of what came into the rate case.
Yeah, I thought that as well. Okay, and my final question is, my assessment, which is based on my reading of the case, is that in either all or almost all areas where ratepayers and other interested parties expressed concern, this JP is very likely to provide a preferable set of outcomes than what would likely come out of litigation. Is that a fair characterization?
I think it's a fair characterization, and I actually would like to echo something that Commissioner Valesky said, kind of piggyback on that. Even the parties that have opposed the joint proposal have unquestionably contributed to making it better.
Yeah, which I think is something that I've seen over and over again with as a result of the public process that rate cases enjoy. So I'm going to support this. My heart never fills with joy when we're approving a rate case, because I often see rate cases as the decision we have to make is the least bad decision. And I think the key here is that compared to all the other alternatives, this is the best decision we could make, is approving this JP. So I'm going to be supporting it, and I appreciate the work that went into it, and I appreciate the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Bry.
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions, just a couple comments, and my comments are going to very much mirror Commissioner Valesky. The Commission and the Department works to balance interests for the public interest. And it is important that we're agile, and as we gain a better understanding of our impacts on the environment and how we make those impacts positive rather than negative for the safety and security of New Yorkers. PFAS, or forever chemicals, are an example of something that we're now gaining a better understanding of, and they're alarmingly prevalent. But it is important and essential that the department has put forward recommendations that allow for the necessary system upgrades for PFAS remediation, as well as direct cost recovery that can be had from the potential federal funding that is now available for PFAS remediation, some of which was only recently announced. And then, of course, for the continuation of the important lead pipe replacement work the company already has underway, with enhancements for helping customers to do these replacements at no costs. And notably, and on top of all of this, staff has also presented the Commission with the first water affordability program New York has ever seen. I commend staff on this work and the work it took to get to this agreement in the JP, and I will be supporting this order.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo my fellow commissioners and thank you, Judge Clark, Judge Moreno, staff and all the parties who participated in this case and in putting together this JP. Everybody has said this is the advantage of being last. What else do I have to add? But I do think I think there's a couple things in here that are specifically notable. The one in particular, Commissioner Bright touched on PFAS and lead. I was hopeful maybe you could expand a little bit on what's in the JP with respect to PFAS, just so there's a deep understanding of what's included here, because I do think it's important.
Yeah, sure. I would be able to, and happy to do that for you, Commissioner. Overall, the JP provides for almost $60 million for PFAS remediation projects, all of which will be completed by the end of rate year 1. The JP also provides $3.5 million in incremental chemical costs for PFAS remediation. Combined, the PFAS remediation costs amount to approximately 75% of the rate year 1 unlevelized increase. There's 14 PFAS remediation projects that were completed prior to the start of rate year 1, so they're already in service and operational. Those project costs came in at about $46 million. There's 5 remaining projects that will be completed during rate year 1, and these projects cost about $14 million, and once completed, all water provided by Veolia will meet or exceed DOH's PFAS requirements and regulations. So PFAS remediation is done by passing water through a granulated activated carbon filtration system. From there, the potable water enters the distribution system. The carbon media is expected to last 1 or 2 years, but because it's a new treatment, there's not data supporting the lifespan of the media. Once the media stops working as designed, it's replaced. And the cost for the carbon media replacement is also included in the JP for the entire term of the rate plan. We already talked about the JP also addresses the potential need for incremental PFAS remediation caused by the enactment of more stringent EPA regulations. There's a 5-year period to allow for compliance for those regulations, which is outside the proposed rate plan. However, the JP requires Veolia to track and defer incremental PFAS remediation costs and report annually on any ongoing efforts to recover damages related to PFAS contamination. And as mentioned earlier, the company is required to pursue grants and outside funding, which will be passed on to the ratepayers if it's allowed.
Thanks, Mike. I do hope that Veolia will pursue damages or the federal funding available, but I'm happy to see that the JB has a firm commitment to the remediation. The other thing that Commissioner Bright also raised, which I think is really notable, and we kind of brushed over it, is the water affordability program. So, I do think it's worth highlighting that that's an important part of this JP. So, thank you, Dakin. If you just want to give a little bit more color on that.
Yeah, actually, for one thing, I want to echo Commissioner Valesky's comments regarding stakeholders. In this case, it really came about with the water affordability program with the assistance of PULP. And also highlight that this goes back several years, and so most of you on the commission, your predecessors set the groundwork for what you're doing today, and it's really an accomplishment that we're adopting this in the joint proposal. In 2016, there was PULP had first proposed a program for water affordability, and there were some concerns about identifying the recipients that would be eligible for that affordability program. And so the commission at that time adopted a joint proposal that provided for a study to look at the development of water affordability programs. In 2019, when the company, it's actually Veolia's predecessor, Suez, when they came back in for rates in 2019, staff testified against the implementation of a water affordability program at that time because of questions that were raised by that 2017 report that was done on behalf of the company. But through the joint proposal and negotiations that were made, there was a commitment that Veolia's predecessor made that when they came in this rate case, they would propose a water affordability program in their testimony, which they did do. In the meantime, during the COVID pandemic, there was a federal funding program in 2021 that was established called the Low Income Home Water Assistance Program. That is in existence right now. At the same time, Suez had adopted on its own a program called Suez Cares, in which it was fully shareholder funded, which provided on an annual basis a single $100 bill discount to customers who needed it, who were going into arrears. We're basically in this program adopting the first water affordability program managed by a water utility. One of the big concerns that we've had in the past with regard to implementing these programs is how do we identify eligible customers? And one thing you'll note in the joint proposal and in the statements in support is that this program is done on an opt-in basis. So that means that eligible customers will have to come to the utility and say, I'm eligible for this program, please sign me up. In our electric and gas programs, there's a provision that allows the utilities that deliver electric and gas to automatically enroll customers, and they do that in consultation with the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance, OTDA, who manages the HEAP program. And through the HEAP implementation legislation, there is a provision for sharing from OTDA to the electric and gas utilities. That doesn't exist in the water systems. And so OTDA has been reluctant and taken the position that it's legally prohibited from sharing customer data with regard to low-income eligibility. So there have been some hurdles that have needed to be addressed. And I think that the joint proposal really creates a fair balance in trying to get as many customers enrolled as possible for this program. At the same time, I know there's work being done outside of this agency and elsewhere to try and solve or bridge that issue with OTDA. And so the joint proposal recognizes that if the sharing issue, the data sharing issue becomes solved, that automatic eligibility will automatically happen. At the same time, to the extent that they have customers that are participating in the federal program right now, those customers will be able to be automatically enrolled. So it's not that no customers will be automatically enrolled and have to opt in. There is some ability to do that.
I apologize for interjecting, but that program actually sunset very, very recently.
Okay.
So the federal program is not available anymore.
So, but Richard, did you want to add anything as to?
No, thanks, Dake. And you did a very good job of taking us back through the context. I think I would say that the stakeholders, the local groups in Rockland County were very interested in moving forward an affordability program for the past almost 8 years now at this point. And I'm sure they're all as pleased as we are that this historic moment has finally come.
And the one thing I'll add at the end is that, you know, this is a brand new program. This is the first of its kind in water. And what we can expect is 4 years of data now through a 4-year rate plan. And we can look at it as we get the next rate case in and see if there's any changes that need to be made. And I'm sure we'll have testimony and things to consider on that 4 years from now.
I appreciate the added history and context. And, you know, again, I applaud everyone involved in helping to create that program. So I do agree that the joint proposal is supported by the record and is in the public interest. It checks very important boxes on the public policy front, obviously safe and reliable service, affordable rates, as well as rate certainty for multi-year. So I appreciate everybody's efforts on this, and I'll be supporting this item.
Thank you. I'll now do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations to adopt the terms of the joint proposal as discussed. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Commissioner Bright?
Yes.
And Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes.
All right. The item is approved and recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. And with that, we'll now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on today's consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Alisi.
No, I'll be supporting the entire agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
No comments or recusals.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Yes, I'll be supporting the entire agenda. I do have two quick comments by way of explaining a couple votes. On item 362, the New Athens joint petition for the transfer lighting regulation of a facility. I'm supporting this. I'm just noting for the many people who deeply study how I vote that there are some superficial similarities to a couple of items that in the past I cast no votes on, but I view this as being distinctly different, and so I'm happy to vote yes on this item. The other item that I want to comment on is 363, which is the Fishers Island Electric Corporation. I will note with some sympathy towards the motivation that there are some public comments that amount to the idea that approval of this order will be too restrictive in terms of allowing customers to install solar panels. The interest of Fisher Island residents in having more customers install solar panels is meritorious, but I'm satisfied that what we're approving today is an interim measure, and that we, the commission and the department, should continue to monitor the FIEC's effort to modernize its electric system so that this valid community interest can be accommodated in the future. So with that said, I'm going to support that and everything else on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
No comments. I will be supporting the entire consent agenda.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sheehan.
I am recused from item 370, and I don't have any comments on the other items. I support those. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan?
Recuse from 370 and yes on the remaining items. Thank you.
Thank you. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Madam Secretary, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further.
Thank you very much. And with that, I adjourn. Have a good day, everyone.